We're at the annual Rutland Railroad group, whatever it's called, Society convention here in Rouse's Point. And I heard this fellow with the red hat on is the last guy to, what were you the last guy to do?
Draw tender on the Rouse's Point Bridge.
What does that mean, draw tender?
Opening the bridge for the boats.
For the boats, okay. So, I know when we crossed by car, there was somebody on the car bridge opening and letting the boats through. You were letting the boats through on the railroad.
Right, Rutland CV rails there.
So did you work for the Rutland or the CV?
CV.
You worked for the Central Vermont.
Yeah.
Okay, now I know the Rutland left the area and stopped operating with the strike of 1961. When did the CV stop crossing the lake?
I think it was in the fall of '62 because they cut the job out in '63.
Okay. Yeah. I haven't asked you your name yet. What's your name?
Trombley.
Where are you from?
Elberg Springs.
Elberg Springs. So what'd you do after 1963?
Went back to St. Albans, worked on the carpenter gang for the Central Vermont.
Okay, so you kept working for the railroad?
Yeah, for another 10 years.
So I assume you were just a young fellow when that closed then?
Well, I was about 30 years old.
Let's see, that's 50 some odd years ago. That must be at least 70 then.
Oh, 86 now.
86.
Yeah.
Okay, now I know there's Trombleys on this side of the lake and on the east side of the lake. Is that where your family's from, the Vermont area?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
My father worked for the railroad. He worked for the CN.
Okay. And you followed along and
Yeah.
okay, so what'd you have, a little booth to sit in out there?
Oh, we had a house there. There was a house that went with the draw there.
Okay.
Yeah, with bathroom and everything in it.
Able to stay out of the weather?
Oh yes, yeah, there was a regular house there.
Oh wow, just like being at a lighthouse, huh?
Oh yeah.
So would you have different shifts? How'd that work?
Yes, we did. There was 5 of us there. Yeah, there was 5 of us worked there.
So between the 5 of you, you divide up the...
Everybody worked 8 hours.
Yeah. Now, what was the season you would operate? How soon in the spring would you be out there?
Well, we used to work the year round, but navigation usually opened around April 15th. But we had to watch after the bridge for the ice in the winter. So it was a year-round job.
So you'd be out there in the...
Oh yeah, in the winter. Yeah.
I can think of places I'd rather be than out there when it's 20 below zero.
Yeah, well, we had to take care of the ice because the ice, when it would move there, it would push on the bridge. You had to cut the ice on the bridge to get the push off in it. Yeah.
Do you know what year that railroad bridge? I know originally it was a floating bridge, I believe, that they crossed the lake with, and then they built what we'll call a permanent structure, although it's no longer there. But if you look from above, you can still see where that railroad crossed.
Still see the piling there. Yeah.
Any idea when that was built? I know that.
I thought maybe I'm wrong, but I thought it was in the 1860s.
I wouldn't surprise me because
I think that's about right. 1865 or something. Jim Murphy could tell you there.
Okay. So that must have been a long day sometimes, because boat traffic isn't always that plentiful.
Well, we had boats all the time, because during the day we always had a lot of boats, and at night there you used to get those paper boats that used to go down through to New York there. So pretty every night we'd have a boat between midnight and 8 there.
Yeah, and years before that, the barges were coming up and down the lake too.
Yes, yeah, because the last few years I worked, they had 7 of those paper boats. They used to run back and forth all the time during the night.
Okay, for the people who don't know, tell us what a paper boat is.
Well, they used to truck pulp out of Canada there to New York there somewhere. And they'd be gone a couple of days and they'd come back. But they always, 90% of their traveling was all at night.
Now, were those mainly like a canal boat, or were the paper on the boat itself? It wasn't on a canal boat that was being towed or anything like that?
No, they run on their own power.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so one of the Trombleys from Elberg Springs. You got family in the area still?
No, there's not many of us left, but my father worked for the railroad 45 years. I had a brother works 42 years.
And how long did you manage?
I was there 25. I left that and delivered mail.
Delivered mail. Oh, wow, that's a good.
I delivered mail 25 years.
Well, that's a good retirement there.
Oh yeah, that was a good job.
So you get railroad retirement plus
Yes.
so you get 3 retirements. You get the government retirement, the railroad retirement. Oh, can you draw railroad retirement and Social Security if you had a different job?
No, you can't draw Social Security.
You can't draw both.
You can draw railroad and
And a retirement.
postal service.
Right, but you can't draw Social Security.
No.
Even though you paid it, did you pay into Social Security?
Some, but not that much, because I never really worked for them. Because I worked for the railroad and civil service.
Yeah, but when you were working for the post office, you were paying Social Security taxes.
Yeah, but it was civil service pension.
Oh, okay.
It wasn't Social Security.
Oh, okay.
They got their own private pension.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. Okay. Okay. Anything else that you think we ought to know about?
Well, no, I guess I don't know if that was much of anything.
All right. Well, appreciate you chatting with us.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. I've been trying to talk to this fellow. He's the most popular guy in the room, at least for the moment.
Yeah, right.
We'll see how long that lasts.
Right now, while you're talking to me.
Mr. Andy Clermont, and I mistakenly called you Don. I assume Don might be your father? Or?
Don is my father.
Yeah, I was looking through the Nimke book earlier today, and I said,
Yeah.
what is Lois's brother's name? And I said,
Well, it's also my son's name. I have a son named Don also, but my father was Don Clermont.
that had all those photos that ended up in the Nimke book.
That's right.
Okay, as we learned in Malone several years ago, you're very much into making these little scale models there, aren't you?
Yeah, I am. I've been doing this since my father, who worked for the Rutland for a short amount of time, got me interested in it at about the age of 6 years old. So I've been doing this for a long time. And I enjoy as much the studying and finding photographs of the building and drawing plans so that I can make them as accurate as possible. And that's what I've been doing.
So we just saw a slideshow here that you put, a little talk you gave, and it's just amazing. What's going to happen? I know you're only 43 years old, but what's going to happen when you move on?
You're very diplomatic.
I got plans for.
Yeah, I've thought about that some, and I really don't know at this point what I do when I pass away. But I guess I'd like to find a home for this stuff down the road at some point in time.
Even if it's just each area gets their own section or something, even if it ended up that way.
It may end up that way.
Try to find a place huge enough to.
Oh yeah. I
know the Transportation Museum in Plattsburgh has some.
And that's the type of a place that could set up the whole model railroad as a museum type of thing, but it would take it's not something that I could just give them and they'd be able to do it at the end. It would take time to put something like that together, to move it, to get it back operating, and to educate someone on how to take care of it. There's a lot to maintaining a model railroad like this.
How big a room do you have that in? Is it as large as this hall here at the American Legion?
No, a little bit smaller than this room here, but it's the whole basement of my house. I had to negotiate with my wife, but she actually said if she can do as she pleases with the upper floors of the house, I can do what I want down in the basement. And it keeps me at home.
That's right. She knows where you are.
Yes, she does. She does, and happily.
Okay, so what do we have here? We'll start at the beginning over here.
Okay, in the front here is the Ellenburg Depot Station, and that still is in existence. It's being, last I knew, used by a tannery, and I don't know if it's used at all anymore.
Okay, that's up in that little side road there.
Yep.
About where the tracks used to cross.
Yes, and this is, Larry Marnes has purchased the Moores Station and restored it as a museum. And this is a model of the way the building looked back in the around 1950 when the Rutland was still running.
Okay.
And so that's
does he have the copyright on that? Were you allowed to make this model?
I actually have a doorknob from the original building. Before he bought it, I went by and the building was falling down, and
so you rescued
and I rescued the doorknob, and I told him I'd bring it back, but he had already replaced them with these antique doorknobs that he picked up somewhere, and he was all set. So I still do have the doorknob.
I've heard people referring to stuff like that, saying rescuing it. So
yes. Well,
and very thoughtful of you to do that.
And I'll tell you, all kidding aside, if it hadn't been for a lot of people rescuing stuff like paperwork out of these buildings, it'd all be in a dump somewhere. Nobody really had much interest in it, but the paperwork that's been rescued through the years shows the traffic that went over the railroad, and it's actually very interesting for some people to look through.
Yes, and as you look at stuff now, you say, well, no, who's going to have an interest in that? But as the time marches on, you realize how important those things are.
And when they were doing this convention, I didn't take the time to do it, but I wanted to see if we could get something out in the newspaper, because some of the shippers that shipped over the Rutland were the Diamond Match Company in Plattsburgh, which became Diamond International, was shipping to Ogdensburg and back. And the Powell Blade Company used to ship razor blades out to Chicago. Wilson Appliance used to receive split carloads of washing machines and other appliances that they'd unload half a car here in Plattsburgh, and the other half would then go over to Burlington to be unloaded.
So they bring it up here to Rouse's Point and cross the tracks up here?
Yep. It actually came in on the Rutland from Norwood to Rouse's Point, and then down the Delaware and Hudson to Plattsburgh for half the load to be taken off, and then shipped back up. And in fact, the Wilson Appliance store in Plattsburgh on Upper Cornelia Street has a picture hanging on the wall of the Delaware and Hudson Freight House with a whole bunch of brand new 1950-era washing machines on the platform that they're unloading. That when I saw that in the store, I'm like, that's pretty neat.
I may have to stop in the store just to see that photo.
Okay, the next one back here is the Alberg, Vermont station. That was torn down in the mid-'60s, I believe. And
is that the one that Steve Mumley showed in his?
Yeah, it is. And he said it was the Mall of Norwood, because it had a little store, the library, the town clerk, and the express business were all out of this building. And in a little spot like Alberg, when people didn't have anything to do, they'd walk up to the station and hang out. And so it really was sort of the Mall of Alberg.
All right, next one.
This is the creamery at Moore's, which was on Milk Street, which is now called Depot Street. They changed the name. And it was just down the
street. Very small street. It's a dead-end street.
It is. And it's just down the street. This was just down the street from where the railroad station was. You could look down and up and see the two buildings. And this was closed in 1937. And the building then was used for Malone Concrete Products, another company that did business with the railroad, and then eventually torn down. So that building's gone. And my great-grandfather's house was actually across the street from this building. And he used to work for the railroad, so we could just walk over to the station from his house. So that's why I modeled Moore's, because my family had lived there at one point in time, and I kind of had a connection to that area.
Okay. You've also, when you gave your talk, you mentioned that your family had a house here on Montgomery Street next to the bridge at Rouse's Point.
Yeah, the first house north of where the track came off the bridge was where my father lived, and as a teenager he used to take pictures of trains that ended up in those Nimke books, coming off the bridge and coming through Rouse's Point Yard, and he had quite an interest in the railroad.
Move along here, the green one?
Yep, the green one. That is the Champlain Freight House. And the Champlain Freight House is now someone's home. It's been remodeled into a house. and it still has the hip roof with the ends at the top sort of clipped off, so you can identify it when you drive through and take a look. Yeah.
The train, I believe, crossed to the north of that house.
Yes. Yep.
See, even though I grew up in Champlain, the train came through up across Oak Street, and then it wasn't an area I necessarily went to. I went to school at St. Mary's, and I wasn't, and it closed when I was...
Right. It was the other side of the river, kind of. It came through from the major part of the village.
If I'm driving through to Rouse's Point while we're going down, it's called Elm Street now, and that was parallel to where the train went through, so we had a little reason to go up there and look at the train station. We're busy on the farm, and when we're going to Rouse's Point, we're going to Rouse's Point.
Yeah, right. The long building in the back was the one of many buildings at the Sheridan Iron Work, and my friend Rob Clark's helped me out with a whole bunch of pictures of the buildings back in the day, and I'm modeling the Sheridan Iron Works, and that's one of about 10 buildings that were on the site, and not the largest. And I find that one of the most interesting industries on the Rutland. They built aluminum stretching machines during World War II that were used by all the major aircraft companies to build the U.S. bombers and fighters, and actually some in England for the war.
And even beyond the war, because I've got a picture I've seen that was supposed to be taken in '53, and it showed us a stretcher being...
Well, and then they also were, their first and original business was printing equipment for binding magazines and such.
Main thing,
and that was their main thing. So it was big business in the day, and they used to receive a lot of coal and other products, pig iron, coke, and then they'd ship these machines out by rail because they were, in most cases, very large and needed to go out by rail.
This is a little... Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, when the Rutland went out of business, that was almost the end of Sheridan Iron, because it didn't become economical to try to keep the plant running after that.
Well, it managed to stay open until 1986, but
it was kind of wound down through the years, I think, though.
Well, no, it expanded. It expanded quite large in the 70s and 80s, but then bought by a bigger company, and like we found out here at the Wyeth Harris plant, well, you're just a little thumbtack on a map somewhere, and you can just pull that thumbtack out and
put it in somewhere else.
So find a job, folks, we're moving you. So this is part of what you have at your home display here. You've got a larger display at home that you weren't able to pull up and bring here.
That's the Sheridan Iron Works, and this would be the assembly floor building where the machines were actually put together. Yep. But they had machining to make all they made the screws, everything for these machines, and had pattern shops. They cast their own steel parts for these machines. So it was a A to Z business, including making their own electricity with coal.
And they had a foundry here too, and they'd make their castings. And
Yep.
So they wouldn't make all their castings, but a lot of their iron castings were made right there before the foundry was taken down. What year did that foundry go down, Rob?
1971.
1971.
November 71. Right around Thanksgiving, just before Thanksgiving, they shut down, and it was the end of a big era for Sheridan, that's for sure. Well, of course, by that time it was Harris. We sold the company to Harris Intertype in 1964. So after that, they were in charge. But we had to start outsourcing all the castings, and that got expensive, and the quality control was lost because it wasn't, the people there doing the work. I can say it was outsourced. So I want to point out on this picture, the newsletter article from 2012 that Andy and I worked on, that picture that Andy used that I gave him to use was actually taken right here. And it's looking
in the real world,
right, of the railroad, right?
In the real world, not
in the real world, right? Yes, and it was actually right in this section, and the picture was taken looking outward, and you can see these windows here, and you're looking out, looking towards Ross's Point. In other words, looking towards the east. And I was just telling Kelvin that our home that I now currently live in was moved in 1942, and this is where it was, which is where John Trombley's modern mechanical plant is today. and it was moved across the road diagonally, basically across over to this off the photo here. And
to make room for this building.
Right. So in 1943, this was the first expansion, which was during the war, and then in the 50s there was another expansion, and the last one, which hopefully I have some pictures of. Calvin and I were looking at yesterday. Hope to do another show here. And 1973, the last edition, in December of '73, on the big bays here. And of course, as you guys were talking earlier, when Harris got involved, they did a lot of other expansions. All this up here, the cupolas were gone. I mean, the inside is still there, but it's all, you wouldn't recognize it today because all the other buildings have been expanded on from that area. Engineering is over in this section now, the upper lobby, the lower lobby, and so forth. Also want to point out too, this was called Joe Ives boiler room, this stack right here, and there was actually another steam engine that was in there. I never saw it, but there was the third steam engine. As Calvin knows, we have the smaller one that was over in the boiler room, and the coreless engine was also over in here, and that ran the whole plant. All those steam engines took care of it before the modern day facilities came into being. So gives you some idea.
Okay, and a salt and pepper shaker, those aren't scale models, right?
That's 1-to-1 scale.
1-to-1.
I guess now we eat lunch.
That's right. I'm holding you up here. I appreciate you taking time here. Everybody wanted to talk to you, and it was time for lunch, and I tackled you before you got there. But we appreciate you taking time.
Okay.
And we'll see you in another of these someday, Andy.
I hope so. I enjoy coming to them, and it's always good to see you.
Okay. Everybody's getting ready for lunch, and we want to catch one more person before we leave. What's your name?
My name's Jane Silvernail. I own a business. It's called Times Treasures. We are railroad specialists. My husband's a New York Central retiree off the railroad, and this is something that we can do together. We've had a lot of fun, and we enjoy the Rutland. It's kind of our favorite line. It came to an end in our hometown, so we've always preferred the Rutland.
Your hometown?
Hometown, Chatham, New York.
Okay.
We're from New York.
Okay. I think that railroad your husband worked for, is that the same one Larry Wolf worked for? I can't remember. I think he worked for New York Central. No, maybe not.
He started on the Central and made his way through all of the ownership changes over the year, and he just retired 6-8 years ago from CSX.
Okay.
So we have what they call Railroadiana memorabilia, relics from the trains themselves, not models, not toys. We like them, but we have
real stuff.
The real stuff.
So you have a store in Chatham, or where?
No. I sell in rented space in Eagle Bridge, New York. There's an antique shop there, a group shop, and we sell online on Ruby Lane. And you can also, I just started an Etsy store. So we have keys and locks and china, dining car china, postcards. We brought paper this time, timetables, booklets, brochures. My husband brought some lanterns along. He has some Rutland lanterns here that he's collected.
Let's just move from table to table here. So right here you got postcards?
Yeah, postcards. These are actually nice Vermont covered bridges, and there's some Rutland cards in there, and just nice cards.
Okay.
These are little better cards. These are actual real photos. There's quite a few antique cards in here. A lot of depot and station cards that a lot of people like to collect of the actual railroad stations, and it's fun to read the messages on them as much as it is to.
That's what they thought were personal messages now
yes,
belong to the
now
world.
Everyone is collecting them. These are my husband's lanterns.
Okay, now postcards, I imagine some of this stuff you keep your eye out on eBay, and
yes.
if you see a bargain, you...
We do our best. Sometimes we don't. Sometimes we get outbid on eBay, but other than that.
Okay, lanterns, yeah.
Lanterns.
What the...
Rutland lanterns.
Rutland. And,
there's a Grand Trunk, which is Canadian. I think there's a New Haven lantern in the back. So the important ones have the name on the glass. This one has a name on the glass that's etched.
Okay, that's priceless. It doesn't have a price tag.
Yeah, well, that's not my area of the business.
Okay, keys.
Keys, locks.
What were the keys for? Just padlocks?
Padlocks, yeah, these are padlock keys.
Okay, and there's padlocks.
Padlocks here, couple Rutland ones. These are hat badges that came off the uniform caps. They would be, well, your different occupations. There's station agent, assistant station agent. The higher, more important occupations would be brass or copper color, and the lower occupations would be like a silver color. So
you're not selling those individually, you're selling them.
Oh, yeah. No, these are all for sale, each of them. We just, different ones. There's, this one here is a police badge. The rest are railroad badges. We have buttons and luggage tags. You would, just like today, but back in the day, the luggage tags were brass.
Okay.
You would you'd get a set, and one would be attached to the bag, and the other one they would give to you, and you'd pick your bag up at the end of the journey.
Okay.
And we have paper, what we call paper, pictures, photos, ephemera, tickets, any kind of paper. A lot of it we try to have connected to the Rutland.
We got D&H stuff here.
D&H, yeah. The D&H was a very big here in Rouse's Point. These are employee timetables. They're different than the public ones. These were given to the employees to...
What's the inside of that look like?
All the different stations and times.
Would it have people's names in it? No,
probably not, no. Just information. This one isn't written in. I mean, they would be signed. I mean, sometimes people sign them, but not always. These are later timetables. They're from the 50s and 60s, but it was basically like instructions at the time that the employees had to follow.
Okay.
When they were in the station or on the train. More photos. These are tickets and a wrench from the Erie Railroad. We like these. These look great on a fireplace or above a fireplace on a chimney wall inside. Timetables. These are all Rutland in here. We brought them for this group because, yeah, that's so some older ones. This one here is from the 30s. We have harder to find the oldest ones. Some books, Boston and Maine sign. This would have hung in a car. Specifically, this is for going to these destinations, and it was from just from an individual car. So it's sought after because they didn't survive. This is some kind of board, cardboard paper product, and they didn't survive very well. But we're lucky to find this one. Just all kinds of different things. Pullman towels. The Pullman Company would have washrooms, and on board you would get a sleeper, and they would furnish your bathroom in your berth. And these are hand towels from the Pullman Company.
See, nowadays people will go to a hotel and take home a souvenir towel.
Right. Well, they did the Pullman towels too, obviously. So that's why
somebody grabbed one.
Somebody grabbed them. Right. There's a different one here. This one's from the Pennsylvania Railroad. It's red, PRR, Pennsylvania.
Okay.
And we have a group of books. We brought brought books. So that's pretty much it. We have the dustpan to clean up with when we're through. And that was actually marked. It says NYCS. That was from the New York Central.
New York Central dustpan.
Yep. It works.
And all the dust has been eliminated, though. And you got some of Jim Jones' videos for sale?
Yes, I do. They're over in the corner, so you should.
Oh, yeah, I've done an interview with Jim, so yes.
One set, all the 6 of the Rutland down through Chatham. And we were so very pleased, especially with the one from North Bennington to Chatham, because that's where we live. So, but
my interest has always been local. If I'm interested in the Rutland, well, I'm interested in what is happening here, not so much what was happening in Chatham or Rutland or anywhere else.
Exactly.
But what's happening in my backyard. So.
Yeah, I hear you.
And a lot of people, I'm sure, are like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
All right, so that's a lot of work to set up. Who's you got a table next to you too? Somebody else is set up
this
here?
is, yes. I'm not sure where he is. He may be in the lunch line.
That's all right.
Okay. No, thank you so much for the opportunity.
Oh,
That's
well.
really nice of you.
So do you have
Appreciate
an online presence if people are interested in seeing what you've got?
it. If they look online and go to Ruby Lane,
Ruby Lane.
RUBYLANE.com, and look for the word railroad. When they get to Ruby Lane, just search for railroad, and you'll find my things there. The shop, we call it Times Treasures, and they should be able to find it. So, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
Does this guy work for you?
Yeah. He does. I let him do the paperwork.
And he didn't bring you a plate. I noticed that.
No, well, we'll get one eventually.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You can go now.
I can go now.
He's first. Okay. A very interesting display here. $20 is all it costs for a membership. You get their newsletters, a little book that comes, I think, 4 times a year, and you get made aware of these conventions. This is the 3rd time we've come to one of these Rutland Railroad group conventions. First time was at the Knights of Columbus in Champlain. A few years back we went to Malone, and today it's in Rouse's Point at the American Legion. So thanks for watching and supporting viewer-supported local television, hometown cable. We're all anxious to point our camera at something that is of local interest, and for a whole lot of us, railroads are an important part of what we're interested in. Thanks again for watching.